Hey guys, I'm finally back with another video. I've got a new microphone now, so hopefully my voice is a bit clear and the keyboard isn't as loud in the background. So where we left off in our last video is we added pagination, and that means that instead of downloading the whole list of data, we're able to scroll through and just load the data in chunks. So that helped reduce the amount of data that we're downloading up front and just improve the overall user experience. But the problem is that we didn't add anything for loading new posts or just refreshing posts if something new is added. So in this video, what I want to do is add a pull to refresh, as well as a little button that kind of drops down when something new is added. So I can show you by the end of this video, here's what we'll have built. If I just go and add a new post here, we'll see on this phone, it's just going to drop down the post automatically because that's our post, and on someone else's phone they'll see this button that comes down and they get to click it, and it'll just pop in like that. So that's what we're going to do today, and let's jump into the code. So in our project, I'm in the home view controller, and I'm just going to add a new variable at the top here called refresh control of type UI refresh control, and I'm going to force unwrap it actually. I'm going to scroll down to the viewDidLoad method, and I'm going to say UI refresh control like this, and I'm going to add it to the table view by saying table view refresh control equals refresh control. And this is going to cause a problem because refresh control, this property here, is only available in iOS 10 or higher, so we need to do that, and then say table view add subview refresh control. So this is the method you'd use before iOS 10, and it should work the same. And the next thing we need to do is add a target for this refresh control and say self selector handle refresh, and we want to say for value changed. Okay, so we need to add this method next. So let's say func handle refresh, and this is also going to throw an error because this selector method here is an Objective-C method, and we need to expose this function to Objective-C by just typing Objective-C like that, and that should go away. So next I'm going to type print refresh, and we're just going to test this out. Okay, so if we test it out, we see we've got a refresh control there, and in the console it said refresh, so we know that's working. The next thing to do would be to actually add the method that populates with new posts. So let's do that next. So this handle refresh method is actually going to be very similar to the fetch post method. So before we start writing it, I'm going to refactor a bunch of this stuff so that we can just reuse it. The first thing we're going to do is move our parsing here, the post parsing, into the post method by creating a static method. It's called static func parse. It's going to have a parameter key, which is the key of the post, and then data, which is going to be a string to any dictionary. And this method will return an optional post. So we can say return nil in the body. We're going to paste what we copied, and I'm going to delete these two lines because we're not going to need them anymore. And I'll move this one up. I'm just going to replace dict with data just because I prefer that. And then here I'm going to copy these two lines, the user profile and the post, copy it, delete that stuff, paste it here, and we can say return post. Or we could just remove that variable post and put this here because we don't need that. Okay, so that's good. In here, what I'll say is I'll remove all these lines and just say let post equal post with a capital P, parse child snapshot key, and then dict, which again I'm going to replace dict with data. Just prefer that. And then here we can say we can remove those guys, and then we don't need these two nested if statements. I can just delete this bracket up here, put a comma, and then this if statement is added on to all these. And I think, do I have an extra? Yeah, I think I have an extra bracket there. So bam, there we go. Our snapshot observer there, this has been refactored. The next thing I want to do is we're going to be accessing this post ref all over the place. So instead of just creating it here, I'm going to make a variable at the top called var post ref of type database reference. It's going to return this So I can delete this here. And I'm going to move this, all of this as well. I'm going to copy that first and say var old post ref. And this is going to be a database query. And it's going to just be this basically, and we just return the query ref, except that I'm going to remove this query limited to last 20. I'm just going to delete that here just to make this a bit more reusable. So then down in our fetch post method, I get to delete all of this and say old post ref query limited to last. I'm just going to tag that on here like that. So now that's been completely refactored. Let me see, we got a couple errors here. Post ref query ordered by post ref. What is the problem? Let's see. Oh, it's just the naming here. So post ref. Yeah, I'll just make that plural, I guess. And in fact, this shouldn't be a ref. The old post ref. This should be a query, because just matching that. So I'll say right here, old post query. Okay, and then this one we lost the last post variable. So what I'll do is I'll just add it here and say let last post equals self post last. And that'll go away. Okay, so now that's been fully refactored to the way that I would like it. And I'm going to create one more up here. I'm going to copy this and say new post query. So this is going to be for our handle refresh method now. I'm going to pretty much switch all this around to first. So this can be first post equals posts first. I'll just copy that here, put it here, put it here. This is no longer the first timestamp. This is the last timestamp is going to be the first timestamp. And I'm going to copy that and put it here. Okay, and the next thing I need to change is we're no longer looking at the end of the list. We're going to look at the start of the list. So starting like that. Okay, so now that we have this method, I basically will be able to just copy this bit and put it in handle refresh. And here I'm going to say new post query limited to, I think I'm going to say to first. I'm going to check on that, but I think that's what I need to say. Limited to first, like that. Observe single event, temp posts. I'm going to switch this to first post. First. And here, first post. Okay, we're not returning anything, so I'm just going to comment that out. And temp posts, yeah, that's looking good. And then here I'll say self posts, append. I'm going to say insert instead. Insert contents of temp posts at 0. So this is going to add it at the front of our array instead of at the end. And then I can just say table view reload data. And I'm also going to say self refresh control end refreshing. Okay. So that's our new handle refresh method, and let's run it and see what happens. Okay, of course we've got one error, so let's see, what is it? Here, oh, child snapshot. Yeah, we don't need to say that. Just delete this here. Okay, let's run it. Okay, so first we're going to need to add a new post. I'll just click here and say this is our newest post. Post it. Again, nothing shows up yet, but if we pull down, we got our new post. So that's great. Let's see what happens with a few more. Let's say 1, 2, 3. I just want to see if we get them in the right order. Perfect. 3, 2, 1. That's how we posted it. So that's looking good. The next thing we need to move on to is adding a listener, so that instead of having to pull down, we can actually maybe show the user something, show that user a button that, hey, we've got a new post now. Or if it's our post, maybe we want to load it right away. So the next thing I want to add is the see new post button. It's just a button that's going to come down anytime that we have a new post to load. So we basically have to listen for new posts and then show this to the user just to indicate that they should either pull to refresh or just click this button and load the new posts. So let's go into the project, and I've already added a file called cNewPost, and I've just built how the button should appear. So it's going to have be a blue button with some text, and it's going to have a drop shadow. So we can go ahead and go into the home view controller and add this button. And I'll say button var cNewPost button. And again, you can just copy this button file from GitHub, or you can just write it on your own. It can be any kind of button. And then I'm going to say var cNewPost button top anchor. And that's going to be an NS layout constraint. And that's because we got to keep track of the top anchor for this button so we can animate it up and down. So I'll scroll down to the viewDidLoad method, and I'm going to add this, say cNewPost button equals cNewPost button. And I'll add it to the view. And I'm going to say turn off auto resizing constraints. And then I'm going to say center X anchor constrain to the view center X anchor. So this is going to center it horizontally in the view. Then I'm going to say the top anchor is going to constrain to the view, actually no, not the view, we're going to say the layout guide top anchor. And say is active, and that's been defined up here. We used that previously. But actually, I want to store this anchor into the variable that we defined before. So I'm going to take that from here and say cNewPost is active. Okay, because we want to keep track of this constraint. And then just a couple more constraints. We'll say cNewPost, the height I'll set to a constant of 32. And I'll set the width to a constant of width anchor constrained to a constant of, I'm going to say cNewPost button, the button inside of there, bounds width. I'm going to say active. That's because I want the width of the button to be dynamically set based on the text in the button. But we have an error here, so let's see what's going on. Has no member is constraint. Oh, I just didn't spell is active properly. Okay, so that should be good to go. I'm gonna just say I'm gonna add a constant of 12 here. Okay, let's run it and see if we see our button. Okay, we've got our button, but nothing happens when we click it. So let's add some functionality to it. What I'll do is I'll create a function called toggle cNewPost button. I'm gonna give it a parameter of hidden, and we'll say if hidden, then we want to hide it, of course. Otherwise, we want to show it. And I'll do this one first. We'll say UI view animate, and we have plenty of choices here. The one I'm going to use is the one that says here we go, timing curve and physical spring. So we want it to have a bit of a bounce. I'll say it takes 0.5 seconds, no delay, 0.5 dampening, 0.5 velocity, and I'm going to say curve ease out. So it'll have a bit of smoothing. And then I can say cNewPost top anchor. So this is the variable we defined up here. I'll set the constant to hidden. I'm going to say is going to be minus 44 points. That's because the height is 32. We need to give it a bit of buffer for the drop shadow, so I'm going to say minus 44. And I'll say here view layout if needed. So that's going to tell the view that it needs to animate these layout changes. And I'll say nil. And then to show it, it's going to be pretty much the same thing, but I'm going to set it to this value here to 12, which is what we defined up here, right? 12. Okay. So what I'll say is we gotta add a handle. So let's say add target. I'll say button add target self selector, and we don't really need to create a separate function for this. It's gonna have the same function as just pulling to refresh. So we can say handle refresh touch up inside. Okay, and in the handle refresh, I'm going to say toggle see new posts. I'm going to say hidden true. So that's going to hide that button anytime we pull to refresh, basically. Let's run it and just see if that works. Okay, so again, it's just appearing automatically. We don't really want that in the future, but for now, I'll just say post 10. And if I click this, yeah, we loaded our new post, so that's good. Okay, so the next would be to actually listen for new posts. We're not actually doing that yet right now. What I would say is I'm going to change this to -44 so that it's hidden from this start. And I'm going to scroll down and create a new function here called listen for new posts. So in this method, I'm going to say new post query, observe event type child added with a snapshot in. And I'll say if let data equal snapshot value as string to any. And I'll say let post equal post with a capital P, snapshot key data. And then here I'll say toggle see new post hidden false. So this is going to show the post button if we've got a new post to load. I've also got to add a check here to say if snapshot key is not equal to self post first optional ID, because the way we have it set up right now, this child added will be called for whichever post ID is this first post, right? So if we have a first post, it's included in this query. So we just need to check down here and say, ignore that one, basically. Okay, so now we need to decide where do we want to listen for this post. I don't want to just put it in the view did load and listen just all the time. I only want to listen after we've fetched the first batch of posts. So here I'll say self listen for new posts, and this is just right after we've fetched those posts and we've reloaded the table. So let's give that a run. Okay, so let's add a new post, number 11. The button appears, so that's good, and we can just click it and we get a new post, so that's perfect. So there's a couple things I'd want to change. One of them is just visually, I would like to change it so instead of reloading the whole table when we add a new post, it kind of just slides up. So that should be a pretty simple fix. The next thing I want to do is when I'm posting a post, when I'm the user that's posting the new post, I don't want this button to appear. I just want it to slide up automatically because I'm already expecting that to appear. I don't need this button to tell me that. This should really only be for when another user has added something new. Then you can show me this button. So let's make those two quick changes. I'll go up here, up to the handle refresh method, and instead of the table view reload data, I'm going to take that out. I'm going to map the new index paths. We'll say 0 to the temp post count map I in, and I'll return index path row I in section 0. Oops, what is going on? Okay, and then the table view, I'll say insert rows new index paths with animation, I'm going to say top. Okay, so that should do the trick. Let's just test it out quickly. Gotta say self. Okay, so let's add a new post, 13, load it, and it slides in, so that already looks a little bit better. And the next thing we want to do is somehow we need to communicate from the new post view controller, this view controller, what the ID of the post we just sent is when we go back to the home view controller. So that way when we're listening, if we find a post with that ID, instead of showing the button, we can just slide it in like that. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to go into the new post view controller and add a protocol called new post VC Delegate, let's say. And for the func, we'll do did upload post and a parameter of with ID string. And then I'm going to here in the class at the top, I'm going to say var delegate new Post VC Delegate. I'm going to make that optional. And just before we dismiss the view, I'm going to call the delegate and use this method and set the parameter ID to the ref key. So that's going to be the ID of the post that we just saved. Okay, so now we need to set this delegate in the home view controller. And the way I'm going to do that is, well, actually, we need to extend that delegate first. So I'm going to say extension, home view controller, new post VC delegate. So we just need to add this method here and say did upload post. Okay, so that means that this home view controller implements this delegate. Okay, and now the way we have it set up in our storyboard, just going to take a second to load it, is the home view controller has a segue to a nav controller and then the new post view controller. So we just need to target this segue here. And what I'll do is add a function here called, I'm going to override the prepare for segue function. And I'm going to say if the segue, if let, let's say new post nav bar equals segue destination as UI navigation controller, because that's the first view controller. And then next we're going to say new post VC equals new post nav bar view controllers 0 as the new post view controller. Okay, and then I can say new post VC delegate equals self. So now we've linked the two view controllers. And if I would go in this method and just say print, we sent a new post with ID, it should work now when we test it out. Okay, so when I add a new post, yeah, down here in the console we see we sent a new post ID, and there it is. So that's perfect. I'm going to create a variable at the top called let's say last uploaded post ID. It's going to be string optional, and then I'm going to say down here if snapshot key is equal to the self last uploaded post ID, then I just want to call handle refresh right away, and I'm going to say self last, and I'm going to set that to nil. Otherwise we're just going to go ahead and show that button again. Okay, and I just got to make sure here I set that same variable to this ID. So let's try that now. Okay, let's add our new post 15, and we're still getting the button, so it didn't work. What that means is that this last uploaded post ID is not equal to this. So most likely what's happening is that this is nil, and I think this method is being called even when we're in the new post view controller. So this is being called before we even set this last uploaded post ID. What we need to do is stop listening for new posts when we're in this view controller. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to add a variable called post listener handle of type unsigned int optional, and I'm going to set that to this. So when I observe here in Firebase, it actually returns an integer that can be the handle for this query, for this observation query. And I'm going to create a new function called func stop listening for new posts, and I'll just say if let handle equal say post listener handle, then post listener, I'm going to say new post query, remove observer with handle, and then I can say post listener handle equal nil. So now we have a function for basically stopping this observation. And I'm going to call this anytime we leave this view. So back up at the top here, I'll say view did disappear. I'm going to call the super. And I'll say stop listening for new posts. Which also means we've got to observe anytime that we go back to the view. So I'll say view did appear, let's say. View did appear, animated. We'll say listen for new posts. And what I'll do is just gonna add a couple checks here at the start. I'll say guard fetching more, guard not fetching more, else return. And I'm just gonna do this. I'm gonna say stop listening for new posts here. So just in case, before we assign a new observation to this handle, we're just gonna stop listening to the previous handle. So I'll just add a comment. This is for avoiding duplicate listeners. Duplicate. I'm also gonna add this just down here. I'm gonna say stop listening for new posts, and we'll start listening for new posts again right here at the end when we've finished refreshing. So I'll say listen for new posts. Just delete that unneeded line there, some of those gaps. Okay, let's give that a run. Okay, let's add some new posts. 18 just loads automatically. 19, let's try that. Okay, it looks good. I'm going to bring up my second simulator. Alright, so I've got my two simulators here. I'm going to add a couple posts. And over here we see on the right side we got the button, and on the left side it just scrolled up automatically. And if we tap that, it goes like that. And I'll just add one more, 21. And we'll see on the left side, even if we were to pull down like this, then it would work just the same. You don't need to tap the button. But there's one thing we aren't handling yet, and let's see if I add a new post. If I were to scroll down and tap the button, then we don't scroll all the way back up to the top, and I think that's what the user would expect. So let's just quickly go into our project, go into the handle refresh method, and right here, I'm just going to move this up here. I'm going to say self table view, scroll to row at index path, row 0, section 0, at position top, and animated true. Okay, so right after we insert the rows, we're going to tell this table view to scroll to the top. And let's just run that quickly. Okay, let's test it out. Add a new post, 23. We've got that there, and let's scroll down a little bit and raise us back to the top. So that's great. Seems to be working fine. And there you go. We've added pull to refresh, we've added a listener, and this little button at the top here. So we've pretty much got like a full working news feed now. We just need to make these posts look a lot better and add some more content. But we'll do that in a future video. All right, thanks for watching, guys. Bye.